Well, hi, everybody, and welcome to the Buckeye Report. Buckeyes Now on Sports Illustrated with our continuing coverage of the Ohio State Buckeyes. The Buckeye Report today is from home, not from the Woody Hayes Athletic Center, because today's interview session went so long that we were not allowed to go on the indoor field because it almost butted up at the start of practice, which we are actually grateful for because we got some really good content, I thought, from head coach Ryan Day, from certainly from CJ Stroud, and definitely from defensive backs coach Perry Eliano. Those three met with the media for almost 2 hours. I'm Brendan Gulick along with Andrew Lind. Andrew, the most obvious thing I took away from today is that there is a overwhelming sense of relief in that building that they're 1-0 and that everything they did all offseason resulted in a win, no matter how they had to get that win, because they didn't want to experience what they had to go through last year, where it felt like every single week the balance of your goals and your aspirations were at stake. And starting 1-0 clearly helped them enjoy the celebration, but now gives them a clean slate to just go do their thing as they start the season.
Yeah, and I think there's multiple levels to it too. It's not only just the opponent that you played in week one, but also, the defense put forth a strong effort, and you kind of saw the 9 months previous, kind of finally be able to come to on the field and finally see that in action, and then to win the way that they did in the fourth quarter, that had to be a big sigh of relief as well, because there was a lot that wasn't necessarily going right on offense once Jaxon went down. And I think to be able to say, okay, well, we're going to give it to Mayan, we're going to give it to Travion, and we're going to grind out a win, kind of answer those toughness questions that if that game was played last year, they probably wouldn't have won because, they would have just been uncomfortable. The defense would have gave up too many big plays and so forth. So, yeah, there was a lot of things that were addressed in that game that, they've waited 9 months to have that addressed, and to be able to see it out there on the field and done properly is a relief.
It sure is, and you could totally sense it. Ryan Day, he was in a golf shirt and shorts and tennis shoes, which is not terribly different from his normal attire, but it felt a little more relaxed. He had a big smile on his face. There was just sort of a levity around him. He's usually pretty good with the media anyways, but I thought he was more jovial than normal today. And he had a couple of fun and felt pretty honest quips. At one point he was asked essentially, it was Doug LeMaurice from Cleveland.com asked this. He basically said, look, you said what you had to say leading up to last week's game for sure. If given your preference of playing a team of this quality in week one or in week 2 or 3, which do you prefer? And Day leaned into the microphone and got this big smile on his face. He goes, depends when you ask me. Friday, terrible idea. Today, awesome idea. Total tone setter, right? It's about what they experienced, what they went through. And, it is pretty reassuring for a group of guys that, has been constantly playing with the idea of redemption. And they got it fairly quickly in the sense that they could put to bed all of those questions about their toughness or playing poor defense when they needed to play well. All of that stuff now just goes away and you focus on just playing football.
Yeah, and I think there's a little bit more to that question too. If they didn't have the returning team that they did, if they had to play Notre Dame in week 1 last year, would he have felt comfortable with that? They probably would have lost that game. So I think that, one, he kind of pulled off of what I said in our last show on Saturday evening after the game when I was like, I'd like to see them play, that big week 1 game every year or every other year, depending on the home and home situation of it. But yeah, to get that out of the way and then have these next 2 weeks to, get Jaxon healthy before Wisconsin comes and, just know that you've seen your team on the field at, maybe not at its best offensively, but on the defensive side, doing just kind of echoing what we said before. You see it in action and then now you're already comfortable with it because you've had that experience. So these next 2 weeks, it's about kind of, working out the issues, the smaller issues, getting people playing time, those kind of things, so that once the Big Ten season hits, then you're back to this point where you're ready to go.
And I had kind of asked him about that, where I sort of said, look, I wasn't trying to insinuate that these next 2 weeks are something you just look past, but the idea that, you've got a chance now to build off something. And Ryan Day essentially said, look, we kind of treated game one like it was a conference game. Like we knew we had to win week one, period. He quickly said that you essentially, as soon as you start changing your mindset about not even necessarily taking a week off, but your quality of opponent, you will lose. That's where you're susceptible. So the focus on being them and being the best version of them at all times is paramount for them this season. He mentioned that his post-game reaction was much more of relief than joy. I'm sure there was some joy, but a heck of a lot more of it was out of relief. He referenced that, he thought, look, maybe it was a bit of a throwback game. It was gritty and tough and physical. That was full-blown, man football. He made the joke that, maybe it was an homage to the 2002 national championship team because Coach Tressel was there. And he's like, we were prepared to give it to the fullback. We just never got there. Or they ran a couple of jumbo packages. There was a bit of a throwback feel to a game where, it was kind of a slobber knocker. You had to figure out a way to just be tougher.
Well, and I think if you look at the schedule, there's several other games that are going to be like that later this year. Obviously Wisconsin, Michigan, and then there's going to be the other games where you're going to want to, kind of make it a track meet and just out athlete the other team because you can, or, you're simply more talented than the other team. So, yeah, I think, in multiple ways, it was just good for them to get that out under their belt. And, it would have been a lot different. Like, say they played Oregon, for example, they could have just, that would have been a top 10 or top 11 matchup this year if that game happened this year. But, they would have just been able to outrace them. You know what I mean? So I think it's just there's so many levels to this game with the opponent, with how they had to win the game and all of that is going to be beneficial toward the end of the year. And, I understand what he's saying about, you don't want to take a week off because you might get beat. Well, let's be honest. They're not going to lose to Arkansas State. They're not going to lose to Toledo. They're not going to lose to Rutgers. They're not going to lose to Maryland. There are certain games that you inside that you're not going to lose, but they still want to have that focus and continue to have that focus because, even if you say, okay, well, we let our guard down against Rutgers because we can sleepwalk past this team. I think it's just more of a mindset of having that focus in every single game and just knowing, you come prepared and then let the result take care of itself. So, yeah, I think it's a little bit coach speak when he says, oh, we can get beat in any week. But at the same time, I think it's just more about instilling that mindset and, carrying that with you week to week.
Totally agree. And he referenced how hard camp was and just, the idea that, look, you're trying to find ways to make your team as tough as you can make them early in the year while recognizing you don't want to push guys to the point that they get injured, especially because of what you have week one. And he said, there are times where, Coach Mick Marotti is monitoring GPS data that all the players have during practice. And if they have, run a certain distance or played a certain number of plays already, he'll tell Coach Day in real time, that guy's hit his threshold. He's done. He can't practice more today. They are very cognizant of that kind of stuff as they're trying to build, not just toward week one, but to be able to be healthy enough for the long haul. Speaking of that, I don't want to go any further without talking about the couple of injury updates, since I mentioned, off the top that that was part of our Buckeye Report today. And unsurprisingly, Coach Day essentially said, look, I'm not going to get into specifics about Jaxon Smith-Njigba's injury. CJ Stroud, about an hour later, said it was a hamstring injury. That's kind of what had been reported. they're going to do everything they can to get Jaxon ready to go. And I think ideally they would like to see him play on Saturday, but only if he's at full strength. And if there's even one iota of doubt, he's not going to play.
Mm-hmm.
Luke Wypler, was seen walking with a boot after the game. They made a comment that, sometimes just bumps and bruises, not a huge deal there. RK, I see your question there about Court Williams. I saw Court Williams warming up before the game. I have not heard that he's injured. He looked fine during pregame warmups when I was on the field, so perhaps he just didn't get on the field. We'll keep our eye on that. And then I asked Coach Day about Julian Fleming and just said, look, I know he was listed as a game time decision, and I know he warmed up. How close was he to being on the field? And he indicated he was really, really close, and he said it ripped his heart out not to be out there. He was unlike some other guys who were not in full pads on the sideline. Julian was. He just wasn't wearing his helmet. But it was obvious that Fleming wanted to be out there, and it didn't sound like he was far away from that. So I think there's optimism that we could see Julian Fleming here this week for sure.
Well, I think I should address it. I did see Court Williams out there for a couple defensive plays. That actually kind of confused me too, because he had ended up switching to number 1. He wears number 2. And then in post-game Carmen, he was wearing number 1. So that kind of threw me off. And I wondered if maybe he made it out there for a defensive play a special teams play when Emeka Egbuka was out there as well. So, Julian, I think, having that tweak, they don't want to necessarily worry too much about, getting him out there in situations where he might, further injure himself, obviously having the long history of injuries last season as well. And to your point about Jaxon too, I think that, it's a matter of with it being a hamstring injury, that's something that he can, make worse, really, just, even cutting or just running or anything like that. So, you really want him to be 100% by the time that Wisconsin game comes. And, if he feels good and the team doctors allow him to go out there and play, I think you're going to see him run a couple series just because, you want to get him back in that game action and comfortable with what he's doing, in advance of that Wisconsin game. But, it really just comes down to the fact that, they're not going to need him these next 2 weeks. So you might as well make sure that he's 100% healthy.
What was your biggest takeaway from Perry Eliano?
I think it really has to do with the mindset that he kind of has. He really has bought into that BIA, Best in America kind of mindset, and just kind of how the players, walk and talk it and live it every single day. And he kind of wants to carry that same mentality as well. So, and really it's just a matter of, there's clearly a lot of respect between him and the players. They respect him. He respects them. They listen to what he has to say. He kind of, in turn is open to what they have, to say and those kind of things. And, I think the one thing that really stood out was just how he approached the Josh Proctor situation, because, Josh made a bad play in that situation. And instead of just letting him, go back out there and say, oh, fix it that way, he really wanted to calm him down and explain to him, it happens. This is where you get better at it and those kind of things. And instead of Josh just being mad that he didn't play the rest of the game, I guess, from what Perry was saying, is that he was still very involved on the sidelines and just, being very supportive of Lathan Ransom, who played in place of him the rest of the game. So, I think it's just a matter of that brotherhood that they've really established in that room, and the respect and just they want to learn from him. So, that's really what stands out.
Yeah, and Josh had played a few special teams plays too as well. And then he said he was in here watching film, both Sunday and yesterday, and is still locked in. And he said, we need Josh Proctor on the field at his best if we're going to accomplish what we want to accomplish this season. So, bad play, rode the hot hand with Ransom, who obviously played well. We'll see how it looks moving forward, but I certainly would expect, based on what we heard, for Proctor to be on the field this week.
Yeah, and it's very easy. Sorry, it's very easy for, those roles to be flipped too. Lathan Ransom could make a bad play, and then they need to ride Josh Proctor the rest of the game, or those kind of things. So it's just a matter of, I think that there's so much talent on the team, and they all kind of recognize that just because they're there longer than somebody else or something like that doesn't mean that they're necessarily going to get to play. It's just a matter of continuing to be the best guy that week. So if Josh comes in on early Sunday morning because he feels that he wasn't his best on Saturday, and he continues to show that throughout the week, and then that builds towards Saturday, maybe he's the one who plays every single play and Lathan Ransom doesn't play at all.
Yeah, no, you're right. It's the shoe could easily be on the other foot there, no doubt. I continue to be impressed by the quality of human being that Ohio State seems to have on their coaching staff. I don't care which position coach we're talking about. These guys love football, and that's pretty obvious. But man, there's an element of love and brotherhood from these guys that I think they are all collectively and individually finding ways to let these guys be themselves, to literally try to point out from an X's and O standpoint why things work, why they don't, but often giving them the freedom to just go play and let them know that, as Perry said, it's not us coaches and you players. It's all of us together. There's not a separation. We are all in this together, pulling the rope in the same direction. And how rewarding it is for him when, you tell something to somebody all week long, hey, this is what you're going to see, how it's going to go. And then they actually experience it in the game, and they turn around and realize, gosh, coach, he knows what he's talking about. He's putting us in the right positions. And then you develop that inherent trust. And I really get that impression from a lot of the different position coaches, but Perry in particular today.
Well, the one thing that I think is really cool too, and we talked about it with Jim Knowles last week, just kind of the reverence that they have for Ohio State. Perry came from Cincinnati and obviously was a big part of them reaching the playoff last year. But to be honest, he's never been in a situation that is as big as Ohio State. And I think he realizes that and just what it all entails. And, for him to do the best job that he can, he has to get the players to buy into what he's selling. And, the best way to do that is maybe not to coach down at them, but coach with them. And I think that's what he really does.
So most of our Buckeye reports are obviously done on site at the Woody after the press conference. But today, because we're at home, we figured we might as well stream this live. I do have some things I want to get to with CJ Stroud. And one more comment from Coach Eliano, but I want to bring in a question here that is, I think, important. This one's from Sue. What news did you hear about the recruits this weekend? This was obviously a massive recruiting weekend with a bunch of really, really highly rated guys that are uncommitted and a whole bunch of other guys that are committed that got to be in a pretty crazy environment. Andrew, I know you've kind of talked back and forth with a couple of those guys. What's the vibe that you're hearing there?
Yeah, I mean, anytime that you win a game against a premier opponent like that and have, all the former players back and all that, having LeBron on campus, for example, I know that Luke Montgomery had been talking, with Mateo and Damon Wilson and Keon Keeley, and they basically all said, if you can get me a photo with LeBron, we'll commit. So, I mean, they all got photos with him. So, the clock is ticking in that respect. But yeah, I think that this weekend was just kind of about establishing and furthering those relationships. But it seemed to me more about 2024, if anything else, just kind of building toward the future, because a lot of the current class isn't necessarily in decision mode at the moment. So yeah, it's just that, it's always great to have the players get back on campus, the recruits get back on campus and be able to spend time with the coaches. But then just the overall atmosphere was just really a home run for them.
And it was as cool an atmosphere as I've ever seen down at the stadium. That was one wild pregame scene with all those guys there, and with LeBron coming down on the field. There were a whole lot of people that had field passes, and a lot of them were feeling pretty fortunate to be down there for sure. I did flag down Coach Eliano after the press conference to ask him a quick question about the 4 different personal foul penalties that Ohio State committed. They had 4 different 15-yard penalties throughout the course of the game. JT Tuimoloau on the first play of the game on the high hit on the quarterback Lathan Ransom when he hit a sliding quarterback, Travion Henderson at a chop block, and there was an unnecessary roughness personal foul called during a fair catch on a punt. And I basically asked Coach Eliano, like, hey, how do you try to address those things with the team, given the nature of those personal fouls? They weren't necessarily, super egregious or selfish. And he said, that's exactly what it is. We want our guys to play aggressive. We want them to play fast. We don't want to coach that out of them. You learn to live with those kinds of things. If they were selfish penalties or where guys lost their cool, different story. But essentially, look, none of those guys felt like they were, Lathan wasn't trying to hurt Tyler Buckner. JT wasn't trying to hit Buckner too high. Travion's block was a bit egregious, I suppose, but, was it a foul? Yes, it was clearly a foul. There was no malicious intent behind it, and he was trying to protect his quarterback. So, when you think about the kinds of personal fouls there was no, long-term concern there. And I thought that was good. The coaching staff essentially says, I don't want these guys to play any less aggressive or be any less team-centric just because they made those mistakes.
Yeah, I think that's important, to point out is just, you don't want to have them in their head too much when it comes to those kind of things. Like you can, like you said, live with the fact that, maybe they were just going a little too hard or, a little too long or those kind of things. And, it's the plays where it is selfish if it's, unsportsmanlike because you're in somebody's face or those kind of things. Like those are a little bit different. But in those situations, yeah, you just learn to live with them because in the end, it's almost a subjective kind of thing. In 3 of those 4 plays, you were maybe there a half a second, too late or those kind of things. So yeah, it's just a matter of, focusing on the good part about it and saying, hey, they were aggressive. It's okay.
Pre-snap penalties are a different story. Those are frustrating, and hopefully those get cleaned up. Obviously, those are, for the most part, 5-yard penalties, not the end of the world, but stuff you can control for sure.
Well, and you can also live with it too when you win the game, and
you do.
Those aren't plays that may have cost you a game.
No doubt. Let's wrap with CJ Stroud, who, God, it's amazing. 365 days is such a difference. CJ. He doesn't love the attention and the flash and the spotlight. He's such a humble kid, but it is so obvious how much more comfortable he is this year. He was laughing with the media. He was happy to stand up there longer than he used to and answer questions. I thought he even kind of poked fun at a couple of the questions. He wasn't cavalier in his answers. He was still fairly calculated, but his graciousness shines through. And I felt like there were times where he was talking at a high level because he was comfortable, not because he was trying to show off. And Andrew, I know we talked about this before the show. Unless you're dead locked in on every word he's saying and you really know the X's and O's of football, some of what he said might go over the top of your head.
Yeah, I think that, that really does just speak to how comfortable he is in his role, just not only as a quarterback and in his knowledge of the game, but also just the comfortability that he has in standing in front of the media now. Because, yeah, there was some stuff he's talking about, fire coverages and those kind of things. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not a Heisman favorite quarterback, so I don't know exactly what you're talking about. But, yeah, it was just very, very intelligent, very high-level football talk. And, for him to be in that situation a year after, times when he clearly didn't want to be up there, didn't feel comfortable being up there, it's really night and day.
Yeah, it was impressive to follow how his brain is working because he pulled the curtain back a little bit. He was asked about a few plays in particular. One of them was the ridiculous throw on the run to Mayan Williams that made everybody go, wait, it was a great throw, but who knew Mayan could make that kind of a catch? CJ's talking about literally exactly what he saw and what he was thinking when he was in the pocket. The play itself lasted probably 6 seconds, of which 1 to 1.5 seconds he was in the pocket. The rest of it was him rolling out and keeping his eyes downfield and throwing across his body on the run. But he was talking about exactly what he saw, how he was processing it, why he couldn't go here, why that guy was covered, why that wasn't an option. Okay, I feel some pressure. I got to go.
Yeah.
And it was, maybe that's not super high level football from a, college quarterback, but from somebody who hasn't typically let you in very much, it's easy as a fan to judge him based off his statistics, which are really good. But there's a lot of guys that have good stats that don't amount to being much as football players.
Yeah.
And I think CJ showed some real maturity and willingness to say, no, this is exactly why I did what I did.
Well, and I think it speaks to just how the game has slowed down for him over the last year too, because, as a first year starter, maybe he's not making those number of reads, or he's not making those pre-snap reads where he knows where everybody is at, because there was times that he was under pressure and he spun out of it. And I think that just being aware of where that person was before the snap even happened helped him get out of that situation or anticipate that it was going to happen. So then, once he gets out of that, then it's okay. Well, he's breaking down each level of the defense. And like you said, this is happening in a matter of seconds. This isn't something that is happening, over a minute or a longer period of time. He's making these reads and these decisions within 7 seconds, because that's how long the play lasts, and, in total. And I think that, like I said, that just speaks to how much the game has slowed down for him, how comfortable he is with the offense, how knowledgeable he is about what everybody else is supposed to be doing. Like, I think that we kind of forget about that as a quarterback. He has to know what everybody else is doing. It's not like he's a receiver where the receiver runs the route and is aware of what the other receivers or whoever is running down the field might be doing. He has to know what his offensive line is doing. He has to have a conversation with Luke Wypler before the snap happens. He has to know where his running backs are blocking, what routes his receivers are running, where the defense is, who's coming at him, who's dropping in coverage. Like, there's so much that goes into being a quarterback that I don't think that, anybody else on the offense necessarily has to deal with. Excuse me. But then, for him to be able to make all of those decisions and recognize all those things in a matter of mere seconds is really impressive.
He gave everybody a pretty good laugh when he referenced that he's the president and Luke Wypler's the vice president. He said, he can make some suggestions, but I get to veto them, or if I see something different, I'll change it. But he was even willing to admit when things didn't go perfectly. There was a certain play where he said, hey, look, Travion should have been on the other side. I misaligned him pre-snap with our blocking scheme. And he quickly said, but, we won the game and you live and learn. Look, I think it's easy to look at a team and say, hey, they didn't throw for 350 yards. They didn't put up 500 yards of offense, or they didn't do this or that. They were only on the field defensively for 49 plays because of the way the game was played. The clock ran a lot. It's not fair to judge the quality of a game and of somebody's performance based on the numbers that you see. Often that can help give you a good indication. But based on what CJ is telling us, the way the offense figured it out in the second half, the way the defense played overall, the speed at which these guys recognized things and attacked them on both sides of the ball made me feel like, okay, everything that we were worried about in the offseason, the attention to detail, the toughness, the readiness to play a big-time opponent under the spotlight, they're good. That we're ready to see a team that is capable of making a national championship run, led by a quarterback who is capable of taking them to that mountaintop.
Yeah, and I mean, I think a lot of the talk about statistics comes more from the outside. It comes from the media, the fans, those kind of things. Because at the end of the day, like they've said, Day said after the game from the very beginning, at the end of the day, they won the game. Yeah. And if you continue to say that game after game after game after game, you're going to be where you want to be at the end of the year. And then you're going to win a national title because maybe you weren't throwing for 400 yards, winning the Heisman Trophy, all those things. But at the end of the day, the team won the game. And then when you're the quarterback of the team that won the national championship, you're going to get, the recognition that you deserve because of that. But say, it goes even beyond that. Maybe he's not drafted number 1 overall because he wasn't throwing for 1,000,000 yards a game, but he still won a national championship. Then he still gets drafted. Then what happens when you go to the NFL? It's the same kind of thing. As long as you win the game, it just kind of carries over. Tom Brady was drafted 249 or something like that. Does he care at all how much money he made that very first year or the second year or anything like that? But, it's just a matter of when they buy in as that team mindset and say, at the end of the day, as long as we win, that's all that matters. That's when you're going to end up winning the national title.
Yeah, winning is everything. And when you have somebody who's willing to lead you selflessly and take the bullets when things go poorly and share the praise when things go really well, you got the makings of a special team. So a fun afternoon to really get a peek into what the soul of the Buckeyes looks like right now. Again, joy for sure, but my gosh, is there a sense of relief in that building after the way things started? It feels like everybody just took a big, deep breath, and now it's settling for football season because all of the stuff that they've been hearing and reading and whatnot in the off season, they answered a lot of those questions. So don't worry about the fact that the team is ranked number 3 now instead of number 2 in both the coaches and AP polls. It's irrelevant. Would it have been nice to stay number 2 or move up? Sure. But that's not what people voted for at this point. And I can promise you Ohio State doesn't care where they're ranked at the moment. So
why is that? Because as long as they win the game.
If they keep winning, then they'll be the last team standing. That's their goal, and certainly it feels pretty realistic at this point. All right, so the remote Buckeye Report today. I thought it was a great day, and look forward to seeing what goes on at the Woody tomorrow. For Andrew Lind, I'm Brendan Gulick. Thanks for tuning in. Hope you'll check out all of our content over on BuckeyesNow.com. Follow us on YouTube. If you subscribe to our channel, you can hit the notification bell, and you'll be able to interact with our podcast along the way. We appreciate the question from Sue, and certainly hope that we'll get more like that along the way. See you soon. Go Bucks. Have a great day, and enjoy the week as the team leads up to Arkansas State.